Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David and Dan recap the Twins' 3-game series against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning into Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson. The first homestand of the season, Dan, does not go well for the Twins, losing 2 to the Guardians and then a rainout, and then the first 2 of 3 to the Dodgers. But thank goodness, Dan, the Twins managed to steal one in Game 3 today. I know it's the Dodgers, but didn't you think that this was it could have been a statement series, that the Twins' struggles out of the gate were just that? It was a fluke, it was a blip on the radar, and we're back to it to AL Central champs.
It could have been. Then they made a different statement. And that was the issue. I mean, they fell flat. At the beginning, they couldn't get everybody aligned, and I get that that's part of baseball, right? That, you're always striving to have all of the elements work together, but they didn't have that. Nobody was great in every game, but they did come out with at least one win, and I guess that's something against the Dodgers.
Yeah, we'll get more into that, coming away with one win against the Dodgers. But I have to say, Dan, you look at their lineup card and it looks like an all-star roster. Like, it's not exactly fair, I would say. And I understand that there's no salary cap in baseball, and there's only so much that the luxury tax can do when you're talking about guys who have more money than we could even fathom, right? Like, it's so insane how much money these owners have. But the relief I would feel, Dan, every time the Twins would get through Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman without giving up a run, that's remarkable. That is a miracle.
I was just thinking of the irony of the phrasing of that, of Betts, Ohtani. Those usually aren't words that go together in a sentence, David, but apparently.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's been some new developments in that story, Dan.
A couple of things I wanted to point out. So the Dodgers have played like 25 games, or so it feels like. I think they've played 15, but they played 3 against San Diego abroad earlier, which my question to you is, would you want the Twins to play an international series early if it meant they got more days off later in the schedule?
No, because I understand that, like, from a competitive standpoint, it makes sense for them to have more off days. But is there anything worse, Dan, than waking up on a day where the Twins don't play baseball?
Is that worse than the times that they lose 11-0 to the Royals? I that's the part.
Well,
I don't know.
If those are my two options, I guess I'd rather still have baseball than no baseball. But yeah, 11-0 to the Royals, that would be a hard one to live every day.
One more thing I wanted to ask you. Did you watch the new episode of The Diamond? I think it's the 4th one now.
Yeah, I was right there, Dan. I was there at the premiere, hitting play, watching it. I ignored my children so I could watch it.
Well, so it's only like a 7-minute spot. You should watch it. People who are listening.
No, I did.
Oh, you did
watch it? I wasn't being sarcastic.
No.
I actually did watch it at premiere. I ignored my children so I could watch The Diamond.
My favorite part is that Johan Santana is in there, and he's wearing my hoodie, which I love. I love watching, and this happens a lot. Rocco wears my hoodie a lot. Like, a lot of these guys really like the hoodie that I have, and I just enjoy. It makes me feel closer to the team.
The way that you phrased it initially, people would think that they were wearing it, but you wore it first. Like they were wearing your hoodie, not that you purchased a hoodie from the Twin store that the pros also happened to wear, Dan Thompson.
But they probably didn't have to pay for it, right? They probably just, they grabbed it out of a goodie bin or something like that.
Well, I don't know. The way that they wouldn't let Santana switch his jersey number, the Twins probably make their players pay for their jerseys. That's why they can't get the pants, Dan. The players won't cough up the extra cash for alternate uniforms.
Well, David, we should get into this series recap against the Dodgers.
Series recap.
Game 1, the Twins lose this 4-2. Not a great showing overall, just 3 hits for the Twins, 10 for the Dodgers. Dodgers take an early 1-0 lead. The Twins, though, take a lead in the 3rd on a home run by, of course, everybody's favorite Twin, Manny Margot.
I mean, Twins fans weren't talking about Michael A. Taylor and how he's batting .375 with an .858 OPS and how they'd much rather would have signed him than Manny Margot up to this point.
Well, I'm not sure that actually Michael A. Taylor would crack the lineup for the Dodgers. As we've talked about here, Ohtani goes 3 for 5 with 2 doubles and a home run. The Dodgers do strike out 12 times. The Twins actually only struck out 7 times, but I don't know. They just could not keep up here. And Bailey Ober did a good job. Only 5 innings, 1 earned run on 68 pitches, but it just wasn't enough power, I guess. But at the same time, if you can hold the Dodgers to 4 runs, you hope that's enough.
Yeah, I mean, in the first, all the Twins fans were feeling the same way, I'm sure, that, oh my goodness, here we go again. Bailey Ober is not nearly as good as we thought he was going to be this season. But I do think we need to keep in our minds, this is the Dodgers. We're not playing the Royals right now. Like, I understand that Ober got lit up by the Royals, but had we switched, right, and Ober only gave up 1 run against the Royals, we're like, well, that's expected. But 11 runs against the Royals is obviously, that's an embarrassment. But 1 run against the Dodgers, Dan, come on. That's great. He did get a little help, though. Top 4, big play by Farmer. Will Smith lines out to Farmer at second, and he chucks it over to first, and they get Freeman doubled up. But Farmer had to be so ready, Dan. If you watch the replay, watch how quick his hands move, because he knows what he's going to do, right? It's just amazing to me how fast these guys can react at times to not just, he didn't just catch the ball. Where like catching the ball is almost the least impressive part of what he does.
Right.
Is he catches the ball, makes a transfer, and gets it to first to get the double play. It's so fast for a guy who, I mean, I know he leads the team in stolen bases, Dan, but I don't think that Farmer would say that speed is his number 1 asset.
No, he certainly would not. Nor is hitting, apparently, his number 1 asset either at the time. The Twins, though, so it's tied at 2. But then in the top of the 7th, Outman and Ohtani homer to break that tie, make it 4-2 Dodgers, both off Jay Jackson, who had his worst outing so far as a Twin, gave up a couple runs there. But the Twins bullpen kind of in generally had its worst game of the year so far, and that's saying something when you go 4 innings and only give up 3 earned runs and strike out 5. Just 2 last notes on this game. Twins finished 0 for 2 with runners in scoring position. So I guess, is that better than 0 for 9? I guess I'd rather they have the opportunities and waste them.
It feels better and worse at the same time, Dan. There's no good outcome here with more runners in scoring position, but that O still leading the stat line.
And then another O stat line. Jose Miranda returned, looked okay. He had a good long at bat, but he was 0 for 2 with, I guess, some good contact before he was pulled. And then we go into game 2. The Twins do lose this one as well. They lose this one 6-3. And the big problem here is that Louis Varland gives up 2 3-run homers, and that was really all they needed.
Well, really, Dan, in most games, really one of those 3-run shots would have done it. I mean, the Twins rarely score more than 3 runs. But that being said, Varland looked pretty good early on. But even in the first time that he faced Ohtani, I was like, whoof, he got away with one there. And that's exactly what Morneau said. And like guys on Twitter are like, look at the cutter he just threw. It's like, did you see where the pitch was? Like, he got pretty lucky that Ohtani didn't smack that one out.
I think it was the next at bat. Varland threw basically the same pitch, and Ohtani hit it, like 114 miles an hour. So Ohtani can adjust. I did want to back up, though, at bottom of the first. So if you recall, Eddy Julien's had an issue of swinging the bat lately, right? I think he had 5 strikeouts in a row, and that's not an exaggeration. All looking, right?
Yeah.
So game 2, he starts the same way. He starts without swinging the bat, 5 pitches in, and he strikes out. But this is my theory, David. He's upset that the Canadian national anthem is not being played before Twins games like the American anthem. So he and Justin Morneau maybe have kind of got this plan in cahoots, right? Because, they're Canadian brethren. And they have decided that they're going to sing the national anthem in their heads before Eddy will swing a bat, like kind of out of protest. And sometimes he's going to walk in that situation, and sometimes he's not. That's what I think happened.
Oh, Canada.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
His love.
Yeah, there's more to it, David. It's a longer song than just our sounder.
That's honestly, that's not the whole anthem.
That's why
I liked it so much.
I know.
Austin Martin getting the start in this game, Dan, and he doesn't waste it. Bottom third, Austin Martin will double to right center for his first MLB hit. But my goodness, Dan, kind of disappointing that his highlight night of having his first MLB hit was on a game like this.
Certainly overshadowed by the 2 3-run home runs, which come in the top of the 4th and the top of the 5th. The Twins do hit 3 home runs in this game. Jeffers gets one in the 8th. And then Correa and Kirilloff lead off the 9th, actually, with back-to-back. So, it is suddenly 6-3 with no outs. But then they go quietly. Tyler Glasnow, by the way, struck out 14 Twins batters in just 88 pitches, which was something of a record in the wild card era, according to a tweet by Nugget Chef. So thank you, Nugget Chef, on X for that. And again, Twins finished just 0 for 3 with runners in scoring position.
I mean, to your point earlier, it's almost good that they had so few chances because they were getting awfully dang close to that record that the Cubs set of 0 for 48 with runners in scoring position.
Well, then their fate turns finally in Game 3. By far the best game the Twins played, the most complete game. It starts with some trouble. The Twins do win this game 3-2, but a jam right away for Puckett, yet he only gives up 1 run. And I think that at least calmed him down enough for the Twins to be able to respond with a couple runs.
Yeah, he looks good, Dan. And I know that his pitch count, I don't know how deep they're going to let him get into games, but 86 pitches, Dan, if he's efficient, that could get you through 6 without a problem in most circumstances.
Yeah, he ends up going 4 2/3, 6 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts. And as you said, those 86 pitches, only 55 strikes, but it was enough because the bullpen held. Actually, Funderburk comes in, gets a win. Alcala, Stewart, Jax, Okert. I mean, the bullpen was solid once more.
And they had a lot of work to do, like you said, him with Puckett only going 4 2/3. We do need to mention, we'll talk about Eddy Julien later. A lot of Julien in this episode, Dan.
Lots.
But bottom first, he leads off with a home run to the opposite field, which is great. Takes away that 1 run that the Dodgers scored in the top of the first. But then bottom third, Dan, the Twins have an opportunity. There's runners in scoring position. It's 1st and 3rd. Byron Buxton comes up to the plate. And what did I say last episode, Dan? I'm a little bit upset about this, if I'm honest. Last episode, I said, when Buxton is up at the plate with a big opportunity, all he needs to do is take the first pitch. Don't swing at it because he's all hopped up on adrenaline. He's super excited to get the chance, and he hacks at a pitch that's way outside. Today, Dan takes that first pitch. It's high and outside. And as soon as he did it, Dan, all I could think of was, hey, he's going to get a hit in this at bat. I guarantee it because he took that first pitch. I didn't have my phone handy. I couldn't send you the text. I was so frustrated because what does he do, Dan? He gets a hit. And then I text you guys and I say, hey, man, look, he got a hit. But I didn't text you guys. And Hogs is like, well, you don't have the receipts. There's no timestamp. Nothing. Look at the last episode. That's exactly what I said was going to happen. You can't be saying that I didn't say that what was going to happen because I already predicted it an episode ago, Dan.
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
But then you sent us a sticky note that had it on it. And it's like, we can't timestamp a sticky note, David.
Do you really think I wrote that sticky note after the fact, Dan?
I mean, I think you could have, right? I mean, what's to stop you?
Oh, Dan. Okay, anyway, enough about this. I knew that was what was going to happen. Buxton got a hit. It scored a run. Absolutely great. Some big plays in the top of the 6th and the top of the 7th defensively, which we'll get to later. And then as we alluded to earlier, Kyle Farmer, the wheels on that guy. Bottom 7, steals, again, his 2nd base of the season, which leads the team. This is what I don't understand, Dan. Clearly, they weren't paying any attention to him because there's no way that Farmer steals this base if the pitcher even glances in his general direction, right? But he looks so funny running between the bases because he doesn't look like a speed guy. And then the best part about this, he gets to second base. He's safe. He stands up and then he puts his hands on his knees, Dan, to catch his breath. And I'm thinking, it's 90 feet. Now, granted, if I ran 90 feet, I'm sure I'd be out of breath. But I'm also not paid, Dan, to play Major League Baseball. 90 feet of running shouldn't be hands on knees situation.
But he's a third baseman. I mean, how much does the third baseman really run? It was fun. There was a play earlier in the series. I think it was Miranda, a grounder to third with a force out. It was 2 outs, runners at first and second, and a grounder to third. And he, rather than making a throw across the diamond, he just ran and made the tag out. I thought that's not usually what you see. Usually a guy has more confidence in his ability to throw the ball across the diamond, but not Jose.
No, well, he's got to protect that shoulder, Dan. It's still in recovery mode. I do want to say, too, about Miranda, I was a little surprised. I assumed he'd get a few starts at AAA, to actually get back into fielding shape. But they're like, no, man, you had 1 game at AAA. You should be ready for the bigs. Let's go.
That's why he went for the tag out.
I am not throwing away my shot.
Well, there's no better transition than, David, into our Puckett's Picks winner segment.
Catch 'em all, Kirby Puckett!
Puckett's Picks winner.
Oh, Dan, please do the honors.
Yeah. This was a close one, actually. So you picked Correa, who had 4 points. The listeners took Kirilloff, and Hogs took Jeffers. They each had 3. And then I had Buxton, who had -1. He struck out a lot in this series. But this is good for you, David. And now you have moved ahead on the season standings. You have 2 points, but we've added a wrinkle here to this, David. And so I think you ought to explain it. I think we can do this 4 series into a 50 series season.
Yeah, I think it's fine. And I think it's fun. So we're going to add a little bit of drama this season. So whoever scores the highest point total out of the entire team, so not just the 4 players that are picked for Puckett's Picks, but the whole roster who played in the series in question, whoever had the most points, if you won Puckett's Picks and your player also scored the most points out of the whole team, you get a bonus 0.5 points, Dan. Which I think just having those 0.5s, it makes things closer, right? It's just so much. There can be 0.5 points between us. Wouldn't that be crazy? We're at the end of the season and the last winner, maybe you're a point and a half down.
Right.
And you need to win Puckett's picks, and not only win Puckett's picks, but your guy has to score the best. I'm so pumped about this. Full disclosure, this was an idea by Dan Thompson to add the an extra bonus point, and I loved it so much, Dan. Loved it.
Well, thank you. I love it too. And this is credit to you, David, because you didn't benefit from this retroactively like Hogs and I did. So Hogs and I have in each of our victories earlier, we actually picked the high team winner as well. So Hogs and I are now at 1.5 points apiece. David, you're at 2. Listeners are still looking for their first win. They have 0 points so far.
Beast versus bench.
Is losing fun? Is losing fun?
I got to go with Correa. And it's because of his 3 hits, his home run, but the defense. I mean, this guy made a couple great plays. So one of them was in the 6th inning of Game 3, where Vasquez, who's looked really actually pretty good behind the plate, he threw out, I think this is the 3rd runner of the season he's thrown out. The ball was perfectly placed just to the left of the bag. I mean, Correa basically caught it like while he was touching James Outman. And it was a big run at the time because the Dodgers are down 3-2 there, and it's only the 6th inning. And then there was the relay in the top of the 7th we're going to talk about a little bit later from Correa. So he's my pick.
This just shows, again, the player that the Twins paid for is not the player they got last season, but now he's healthy and he's showing his abilities. I'm going to go with Julien, and honestly, Dan, he was maybe going to be my bench pick until Game 3. And then here's what I think happened, Dan. You know, at the end of the game, the Dodgers and the Twins, they're heading back to their dugouts. I think somebody on the Dodgers said something derogatory about Canada, and they awoke the beast that is Eddy Julien.
Oh, Canada.
And he woke up this morning, Dan, and he chugged some maple syrup, and he mounted his horse, and he rode it into Target Field, and he said, "I'll show you what Canada's about." The Great White North, Dan. We know how to hit those balls deep, you know.
Maybe what the Dodgers said was just what you just said. They just spouted a bunch of Canadian tropes at him.
I hope that they were like mocking him, like, "Yeah, it was good syrup this morning, I bet, huh, Eddie?"
You do it. That's a good Canadian accent there too, Coop. Is that
well, you know, we're pretty close to that border, and I had a lot of Canadian friends in college, and so
can we
always get
back
mad
up a
at
second?
me.
You're not that close to the Canadian border. I am close to the Canadian border. I'm 3 hours from Canada, David. You're like a good 6 from Canada.
We're the North Star state, Dan.
But
when you ask anybody in the continental U.S. which state they think is the most closely aligned with Canada, it's going to be Minnesota. No one's saying Washington, Dan.
No, they're not. I'm just saying geographically, I could reach out and touch Canada faster than you could. That's my point.
Yeah, I don't quite understand exactly what's happening here,
Right.
Where we've gotten to this point. All I'm saying, Dan, is Eddy Julien was clearly upset, and he put that anger into the ball.
Fair enough. I'm going to go with my bench here. I'm going to go with Matt Wallner, the hometown guy. 0 for 5 with 4 strikeouts. Some of his swings and misses look as if is he looking in the right direction? Like, he's missing baseballs by like 6 or 7 or 8 inches. It seems like to me on TV, he's just violently swinging and hoping that he's going to hit the baseball, and he's not.
I think to his credit, he has had some rough calls go against him. And
Sure.
I actually tweeted at one point that I think the umps think that Matt Wallner is the same height as Jose Altuve, like with the strike zone that they're giving him, because they are given that low strike call to Wallner every single time. And I'm not exactly sure why. However, I think he's so bitter about those calls, he can't let them go to see the ball coming on the next pitch. Like, he's still thinking about that last pitch and how it didn't go his way. He's got to learn to shake that off, Dan.
Maybe he's just got very long thighs. Don't you think? Like, could that...
Add that to the list of players' body parts that we're tracking, Dan. So what do we have? We have Correa's ankle, we have Buxton's knee, we have Ryan Jeffers' smile, and then now we have Matt Wallner's lengthy thighs.
Oh, David. Well, who is on your bench?
I'm not exactly sure. It's either Castro, who went 0 for 5 and got picked off in Game 3. We need to point this out, Dan.
Please attempt to be a gentleman.
He didn't get picked off because he was trying to steal second. He got picked off because the player at the plate called timeout. Castro didn't go back to first base. He just stayed with his lead, obviously not paying any attention. The batter re-enters the box, the pitcher engages the rubber, and Castro is still definitely not thinking, "Oh, the game is in play." And so he gets picked off easily at first. So that alone, honestly, should have put him on the bench, because that is a Eddie Rosario-esque base running blunder if I've ever seen one.
Yeah.
However, Jose Miranda comes up. He gets another opportunity in the bigs after a very short stint at AAA to make sure he could play third base. And honestly, Dan, him and Castro, it's like they're playing chicken to see who can be worse before getting sent down. I don't understand it. You have this opportunity, and if we've said it once, Dan, we've said it 1,000 times. If you're Jose Miranda, you can't throw away this shot.
I am not throwing away my shot.
Have we already used that sounder? Is that the second time?
I am not throwing away my shot.
All right. Moving on to Rocco's Rewind.
Rocco's Rewind.
Well, Dan, as it so often does, we find ourselves questioning Rocco's decisions when it comes to starting pitching. So specifically in Game 1, Ober, as we mentioned, doesn't look terrible, right? So he gets through 5 innings. He's sitting at 68 pitches, which is obviously not a crazy pitch count. Like, he could definitely go further. However, at that point in the Dodgers lineup, you have your big boppers coming up. So it's going to be Betts, Ohtani, and Freeman. Rocco decides, I'm going to go to Okert, which on Twitter, everybody immediately, oh, why is he pulling him so early? I don't know. It's so easy to look back, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy after the fact to be like, clearly he should have kept Ober in. I don't know. I think that Ober probably should have stayed in this instance, because you're not sending Duran out there. You're not sending Thielbar out there. You're not sending Jax out there. You're sending Okert out there, who, Dan, in the preseason depth charts, it wasn't a guarantee that Okert was going to make the team.
Right.
So I think in that instance, you roll with Bailey Ober and you see what happens. With all the guys who are injured from the bullpen, I think that would have been the better call. I don't know what would have happened. Maybe Ober would have got lit up, but we do know what happened with Okert, and it didn't go well, Dan.
Yeah, it's the same thing that I've said before, where why not just let him try to start the inning, have Okert ready? If he gets into trouble, then you yank him. I think that's a simple fix to that. I'm going to go with Game 3. So I'm actually going to kind of praise Rocco here, and I'm guessing he didn't actually think this through the way that I have. But he left Eddy Julien in to face a lefty here. His name is Alex Vesia. Eddy Julien hit his second home run of the game, lefty off of a lefty. And Morneau, I believe, pointed out that Julien has been lobbying to try to stay in the lineup more, to his credit, against lefties. And so it's plays like that's going to show it. But Alex Vesia actually has reverse splits. Now, they're subtle, but he, as a left-handed arm, actually gives up more hits to lefties than he does to righties. Last year, the batting average was .279 against lefties and .250 against righties. So I don't actually think that Rocco looked at that.
No, tell they've got it backward. Tell them to turn it around.
It wouldn't be a Min for the Win episode unless Dan Thompson referenced reverse splits. Like you said about Rocco not really thinking things through, it was pretty funny at the end of the game in the interview. Rocco was asked about pulling Ober, and he said, well, at that point, I wasn't really looking at pitch counts. I was just sort of looking. It's like, dude, just get better at answering questions. Like, I hope, honestly, if you're truly not thinking about pitch counts and who's the best guy for I don't really want to know the subjective thought process you went through. You have time. The game's over. You can justify your decisions however you want. Don't tell me that you didn't really think about this or you didn't really think about that. Tell me what you thought about. Don't tell me what you didn't think about. That's terrible.
Fans want an ejection. There he goes.
And that was Gardy's Gripe.
Well, hey, let's reset here. Let's go on to the Minnesota moment.
Minnesota moment.
Game 1, top of 6th. I had momentarily stepped away, and so I didn't see this until I saw kind of the tail end of the replay. Byron Buxton. What I see is Byron Buxton kind of twirling around and slapping his glove and seemingly, I'm thinking, gosh, did he just hurt himself? Did he miss a catch? But then I see the replay, and he has made a spectacular diving catch to right center. And I think my favorite part of this was that he dove and his head stayed above the ground. There was no slamming of the head into the ground. It was a perfect slide in that situation, and he popped up and he almost doubled off the runner at second, which I think is what he was, partially why he was striking his glove, but I think it was also, he was just so excited to have made a play like that. And when you watch baseball players get to do what they love, and you have seen all of the frustration of not being able to do that for a year, he got a lot of flack last year, or maybe he didn't get a lot of flack, but Rocco got a lot of flack for how he talked about Buxton last season and how, it was like this waiting game of will he ever play center? Well, maybe. This guy wants to play center field. Nobody has ever really doubted Byron Buxton's heart, and we saw that heart on display when he made that catch, and that was so cool.
The catch was remarkable, and I'm so glad that you referenced how quick he popped up. The awareness that not only did you get the out, but you have a chance at a second one, how quick he was to get that ball in. It would have been so cool. I mean, it would have been SportsCenter #1 for sure if they got the double play, but the catch alone is worth a spot in the top 10.
You have another defensive play too. Is your moment.
Game 3, top 7, 2 outs, Ohtani on first, Freeman at the plate. Freeman hits the ball down the right field line, okay? Clearly a double, probably a stand-up double, depending what happens in the corner. Ohtani is taking off. It's 2 outs. Good chance he's going to get sent all the way to home if he gets to third and the ball isn't all the way in yet, right? So normally, Dan, the way that I would watch fielders move, I would expect the first baseman, Santana at that point, to be the cutoff man. Or if Santana isn't available, then I would expect Julien to be the cutoff man for the throw from the right fielder, who at this point is Alex Kirilloff. But lo and behold, Carlos Correa is on the right field line, Dan, and he gets the throw from Kirilloff and throws a bullet 92.2 miles an hour to Vasquez, who gets the tag down on Ohtani before he touches home plate. They have to review it, so the moment has some drama robbed from it because he's called safe initially, and he definitely wasn't. Even live, I thought, oh, he's out. Like, for sure he's out. Vasquez got the glove in front of the plate. But anyway, what a throw by Correa. But I also had to ask, Dan, is that normal for the shortstop to be taking a cutoff throw from the right fielder to go home? And the answer is no. Like, everywhere I looked, I'm like, that's not how players move. But Correa's asked about this after the game, and he basically says it in nicer terms, and he's really complimentary about all the other teammates around him.
I want to build a championship culture.
But he says, I want to be the guy to make that throw. Do you think that's Correa deciding, like, from the get-go, this is my throw to make? Or do you think they've run that before and Rocco's on board? Or how do you think the inner workings of that happens?
That's a good way to ask it. I do think that Rocco's probably saying, Correa, you got to take that. Like, we don't care where you are in the field, but it's smart, right? I mean, you want your strongest armed infielder making those relay throws. I've seen him make it, I think, behind third, too, and which would make more sense for a shortstop. But he's the guy you want connecting. We also got to credit Alex Kirilloff for the throw back in, too. We have made fun of Alex Kirilloff for some of his poor relay throws, and I get that he wasn't perfectly healthy, but that was encouraging to see him that he could throw a baseball to get to Correa quickly enough so that Correa could gun him out at home, and a great tag by Vasquez, too. Well, hey, let's move on here to Mauer's Musings. We have some roster questions.
I just don't know how it can get any better.
Mauer's Musings.
Wallner, Martin, or Miranda, Dan, who gets sent down when Kepler comes back?
I think it's probably going to be Wallner at this point, because you have enough guys who can play in the outfield. Otherwise, Kirilloff can go move over to left field. It will depend, though, on how well Austin Martin plays. If Austin Martin shows that he can be a major leaguer, and if he has more games like he had really in the second 2 games of this series, I think he's going to stick. I think they're going to give him a chance.
Let me throw a dark horse in for you. Willie Castro being sent down.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to do it. I think that he stole 30-something bases last year. I think that they like his speed. The pickoff aside today, they need his positional flexibility. Matt Wallner doesn't have that right now, and we know that Max Kepler will not leave right field.
No, he's doing his calculus out there, Dan. He has all of the angles covered, and let me tell you, this was a big talking point when Manny Margot was in right field. Morneau went off for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes on the broadcast about how difficult it is to play in right field in the majors at Target Field.
But, okay, and this is a quick aside. Mookie Betts, to his credit, moved to shortstop after being a Gold Glove outfielder. And it frustrates me a little bit that Max Kepler has been unwilling to even move to like center field for a day or two. Anyway, it makes me like Mookie Betts quite a bit.
What, to know that he hadn't played shortstop since like high school regularly.
What an athlete. So my musing is also roster-wise. Who's going to get the most time at third before Lewis returns? And this is kind of, when all is said and done, hopefully Lewis is back sometime in early June. Is it Farmer? Is it Castro? Or is it Miranda?
I don't think it's going to be Castro. I think that his ability to be an everyday player depends on exactly what you just said, his positional versatility. He's not an everyday third baseman. Farmer also may be a bit stretched as an everyday third baseman. Miranda is still a guy the Twins see who could be a guy. And so if he's going to be a guy, he's going to have to play third base every day, and he's going to have to find some offensive production. And the question really just becomes, is Jose Miranda a major leaguer or not? And I think this is the best opportunity and the best window the Twins are going to have to figure out the answer to that question. But I do think that unless Miranda can show himself to be effective at the major league level, the Twins don't have a lot of options. What are they supposed to do at that point, Dan?
Yeah, I don't know. I hope that Miranda can prove himself and that it makes that decision difficult.
Series grades.
So my 2 categories, advanced retreat and well-played baseball. So I think as far as advanced retreat, I gave it a 6 out of 10. It was certainly going to be lower before game 3 because I was pretty low. On our text thread with Hogs, Hogs and I were almost considering, is this a bad baseball team that we're watching here? It's a 10-game sample size. If this was a different stretch in the middle of the season where they went 4-6, because that'll happen to teams, maybe we would not be panicking so much. But they did show something at the end. But I still think overall, this is not the kind of step forward we wanted to see this team make in this series. But as far as well-played baseball, we were seeing the Twins do things well that maybe we're not accustomed to seeing in this way. We saw great relief pitching and we saw great fielding. We even saw some decent base running until Willie Castro's mistake there. And so I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10 on that. That's a 14 out of 20. That's a C-.
Let me do a little bit of math here. So that'd be a 7 out of 10. So 70% C-. Checks out, Dan.
Thank you.
Done.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So I'm going to give him a C+, actually. And I think the biggest reason for that is if I told you, Dan, that the Twins were going to take 1 of 3 against the Dodgers, and if you had told me that, I probably would have given them a B. I think in this instance, Dan, game 1, they really gave up an opportunity. Had they put any offense up on the board, they could have won that game. If the starting pitchers and the bullpen can hold the Dodgers to 4 runs, something has to give on the offensive side of the ball for them to come away with that victory. It just needs to happen in those instances. And I get, we talk about the Dodgers as this like Megatron unstoppable team. But the thing is, Dan, if the Twins are going to win a World Series, you have to beat teams like the Dodgers. Like we can't always celebrate these little victories of stealing a game from the Dodgers, because if they're going to be a team that can fight for championships, we shouldn't be surprised that they win 1 of 3, especially when they're at home. And I know I'm giving them a decent grade here, but I do think the mindset needs to change as the season progresses and as the team gets back to health.
David, let's move on. We have more Dodgers news here in Herbie's headline.
I don't know, Jack. It looked like Herbeck pulled him off the bag.
Herbie's headlines.
It is kind of fun to be talking about this segment and it be about the team that we're currently playing.
Yeah, so it seems that Shohei Ohtani and his team have found their fall guy, and it looks like they're going to settle here this case with the betting scandal, dare we call it?
So apparently, Dan, unbeknownst to Ohtani, his interpreter went in and changed a whole bunch of his banking passwords and blocked transactions from being seen by Ohtani. But all I can think of, do you remember, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, Minnesota Vikings great wide receiver Chris Carter? He got in trouble because at a rookie training camp, he started talking to these guys and saying, your crew, they're going to want to hang out with you and you're going to foot the bill. But when something goes down and the cops are called, your crew better know that you are the last guy to go down. Like they need to take the fall for you. And it's like, this just seems like that, but more sophisticated, Dan.
It totally does, especially when Ippei came out first and said a much more credible argument, right? That's the thing, is that it seems much more realistic that Shohei Ohtani's interpreter got into some financial trouble and Shohei paid off his debts as a friend might do when you have a gazillion dollars, right? Like, yeah. It's the simplest solution. This is so convoluted and doesn't jibe with what we've seen of video of their relationship, even after some of these alleged incidents happened. I just don't buy it.
No, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Dan, that truly Ohtani knew nothing of this and the money was just being filtered out of his account without his knowledge. Not a chance. And honestly, I hate to say this, and the most likely scenario is Ohtani's making these bets. And I don't care how many times they say that he doesn't, Dan. Where there's smoke, there's fire to some extent here. There's no way that Ohtani had no even slightest idea that his interpreter is racking up millions of dollars in gambling debts. It makes no sense to me at all. I think that's the least likely option, honestly.
But it's the best option for baseball's image, and I think that's what they're more concerned about.
And I think that's what's the most frustrating here, is that obviously different rules for different players is what's at play, and I just don't think that that's right. And Pete Rose aside, whatever you want to say about players betting on the game, and we had a whole bunch of arguments about this last season. You can go back and find episodes of tons of time where we talk about this. I just think that there needs to be more transparency here to show us what actually happened. And if you want to be as charitable as possible, Ohtani got robbed from his interpreter, didn't know about it. The interpreter found out that he got found out, so he tried to beat Ohtani's camp to the punch, went on ESPN and made a statement to make it sound as though to keep Ohtani out of trouble, but also in trouble because he's paying these gambling debts. I just think that there's too many moving pieces for Ohtani to be that oblivious that this much money is just gone.
Yeah, it's still
lot of... How does he not have a professional accountant telling him this is happening? Like, you're telling me he doesn't have a guy who's managing his finances? He just let his interpreter manage his Wells Fargo free checking account? I don't think that's what these guys are doing, Dan.
We will need to wait until he retires and we get the tell-all in his memoir, I think.
Who's going to need an interpreter to write that for him?
Maybe that'll be the great reunion, right? Ippy will write it for him.
No, Ohtani writes it, and then Ippy will rewrite the pieces that he wants to. Yeah.
All right, let's move forward here. Final segment, Puckett's picks for the Tigers series.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
Puckett's picks.
Well, the Twins have 4 in Detroit against the Tigers. That's followed by 3 in Baltimore against the Orioles. So you got to think the Twins need to win 3 of 4 here to make the fan base feel a little bit better. The listeners are going to go with Correa. Makes sense. Because I had the low score next. I'm going to go with Kirilloff. And Hogs is going to throw in. He's actually going to fill in for me on the next episode. He's going to take Austin Martin, which leaves some other names for you.
I got to take Byron Buxton. I mean, if you're picking 4th and Buxton is still available, I know he's had his struggles, Dan, but 4 games against the Tigers, let's do it, man. He's going to score some points.
Sure hope so. And it would be great if the Twins could end this series, and instead of being 4-6, they're 7-7. I'd feel pretty good about that.
Oh, wouldn't it be beautiful, Dan?
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and take us out. Hogs, thank you in advance for filling in for me on Sunday. And here we go. Folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on X at Min for the Win. Find our Min for the Win Facebook page and Instagram pages. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your favorite platform so you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we would greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. The link is in our description. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Min for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, 2 avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.